Streaming live, this is News Nation Now.
And a good Thursday afternoon. Thanks for joining us here on News Nation Now. I am Aaron Nolan. If you take a look at your screen, our focal point today in an exclusive interview, an exclusive story to News Nation Prime is Harvey Weinstein. He was convicted in 2020, but tonight we have got a very special look, an interview with Jessica Mann, one of the women who accused Weinstein. Let's take a look at that story.
Harvey Weinstein has submitted an appeal. He says he did not receive a fair trial and that his constitutional rights were violated. How do you respond to that?
I almost find the situation laughable.
Why is that?
It's just so typical. He's looking for the loopholes, anything he can find, and at this point it's not a surprise. It's the 100+ voices of women who never knew each other, who never spoke, who lived in the dark and hid this shame and dealt with this trauma, attest to the fact that this man is not innocent. So he's delusional.
This story runs tonight on News Nation Prime. That is 8:30, 7:30 Central on News Nation. Our investigative reporter, Rich McHugh, joins us now. Rich, you were able to put this story together. First things first, what was that emotions like, being able to sit down with Jessica and talk about something that was so difficult for her in her life?
Thanks for having me, first of all. It was, I've been speaking to Jessica since the start of the trial, so that's over a year now, and she didn't make this decision lightly. This is something that she has been very deliberate about, and right after the trial, she did not want to speak, and she didn't speak, and it's been a year, and nobody has heard from her, and she's been very focused on her own healing and process, and just trying to kind of get away, frankly, from the media and the whole trial. And so for her to come out now, I think is a big deal. I know it's a big deal for her, and she's doing it for a very specific reason. She's been working behind the scenes on a topic that was central to this trial, which is the topic of consent, the definition of consent. Because it was always Weinstein's position and the defense's position that this was a consensual relationship. When Jessica Mann was called as a witness, that's what they tried to point out. And her position is that no, it was not, and that's why she's now focused on trying to get. There's a bill that has been just introduced last week, trying to get that bill passed. And the focus of that bill is to clearly define what consent is, whether this is for workplace or whether this is for sexual assaults, relations between men and women, because when it goes to a judge, in penal code right now, there is no definition of consent.
Something that is no doubt important. If you're just now joining us on Facebook or maybe your station's Facebook page, your favorite local television station, this is News Nation. You can watch this story with Rich and what he was able to do coming up tonight on News Nation. Go to newsnationnow.com to find out more information about how you can get our television station. But I want to break down this story, Rich. I was able to watch it earlier today and preview the story. It's a fantastic piece. A lot of hard-hitting questions in there, a lot of emotion, and we talk a lot about emotion, and sometimes in trials they're not emotional. Lawyers don't really get into that. Attorneys can't really get into that emotion. Jessica Mann did not hold back when she spoke to you about this. It was extremely emotional. It was very difficult. Tell me about the question when you asked her about addressing Harvey Weinstein, when she had to stand there on the stand and identify Weinstein.
Yeah, so I asked her, there was a part where she was talking about how grueling it was being on the stand for 3 days and the cross-exam. And I said, did you ever have to, look at him directly? Did you ever look at him directly? And her answer kind of shook me. She said, yeah, I looked at him, and his eyes were completely black and beady. And she was like, it shook me to my core. And she was almost like shaking even just thinking about it. And so that this was something that was quite, reliving the whole experience just in the conversation that we had was traumatic.
Well, and I think she used the word overwhelming in that moment. And you can imagine testifying before a jury, before a judge, before the world, accusing this man of what he was eventually convicted of. But again, talk about that difficulty that Jessica Mann had on the stand. It wasn't easy. She actually had a moment where she broke down. And then in the piece, in your story, she talked about PTSD from this whole experience.
Mm-hmm. It was a pivotal for the reporters that covered it. I was there. I mean, it was a pivotal moment in the trial.
Yeah.
When it was, I believe the second day when she was on the stand, and she was being cross-examined by Donna Rotuno, his defense attorney, and she lost it, and they had to adjourn for the day, and her cries were heard from a back room, and everybody in the courtroom heard this, and the press the next day, that evening, seized on that and questioned whether her ability to move forward, and so she talks about that in great detail. You know, we dive into that, what happened, what prompted that, and yeah, it was traumatic for her, and she's been working through that. You know, it's not just the trial. There was years prior that she's been dealing with this. Nobody knew about her. You know, when she appeared at the trial, she was like the star witness out of nowhere. You know, having covered the Weinstein story for as long as I have, you know, we were all kind of asking, like, who is Jessica Mann, and what is this story? And so she turned out to be the linchpin of the trial, and but it was that moment that really kind of shook everybody in the courtroom, and was like, wow, this is, you know, can she continue? And to hear her describe it is quite something.
So we always hear when we do these stories as journalists that the victims have to go through it again, have to relive it again as a witness in a case like this. Has she recovered from, first and foremost, the tragedy of what she went through and then having to relive that again? Has she been able to compartmentalize and grow from that point of the outburst that was heard in court?
Well, I don't want to speak entirely for her on this point,
Sure.
but my assessment of her, having spoken to her right after the trial and now, is that yes, she is doing much better. She is continually working on this. She's working through trauma with specialists, working through PTSD from the trial and from the experience, and so it's all kind of lumped together. But she is taking it extremely seriously, and you know, such that she wants to be a model for how this can work for other women who come forward with similar experiences.
Rich, you brought up a great point. If you're just now joining us on News Nation now, we're talking about the trial of Harvey Weinstein, and one of the star witnesses that Rich McCune, our investigative reporter, has been able to chat with. We're going to have that story tonight, 8:30, 7:30 Central on News Nation, that post-Me Too movement. And she mentioned that in your story of, yes, she went through these traumatic experiences of not only the original crime, but also having to relive it in court. But she's using that to make a difference. How is she doing that in what she called the post-Me Too movement?
I think the way she's processing this all is she made a decision, and she wrote about it in what's called her victim impact statement, which she read to the judge before the sentencing. And I think it was, you know, I'd characterize it as a vow she made to other survivors that she's going to kind of lead the way and show how this is possible and how she can make change. And for her, she's narrowly focused on this topic of consent and trying to get that bill passed. And so so there's no gray area, whether it's in corporate America or whether it's in, you know, at a party and there's alcohol involved. Consent is where she thinks we're going to go. The topic of consent needs to be addressed in the post-Me Too era.
What surprised you the most out of your time speaking with her?
I mean, there was a lot. Hearing what she was processing, you know, being on the stand for 3 days and what was going through her mind, but also sitting with her in person and seeing kind of how this still reverberates with her. And this was a very tough interview for her. she was not enjoying it.
How long did you get with her?
About 40 minutes.
And Rich has condensed this down to about 10 minutes. You're going to see two different parts coming up tonight on News Nation. In that 45 minutes, what's maybe one thing that you weren't able to put into the story that hit you a little bit hard?
There's some that she talks about with regard to the upcoming trial in LA. He's also facing severe charges in LA. And it was news to me that she also could have pursued charges in LA, Los Angeles. Her charges for this trial were in New York, but she was very clear to point out that she is stepping aside, or she didn't follow through, because she wants to give other women an opportunity to get justice, their justice. And I thought that was pretty surprising and remarkable and noble of her.
I think there's a lot that you're going to find in this interview, again, from what I've been able to watch so far of your story, Rich. One thing that hit me hard, you ask her, is she okay? Has she been able to move on? And she mentioned something that she wasn't completely sure if Harvey Weinstein didn't want to kill her. When you hear that, and I watched it in the piece, your mind instantly starts to go, the reality of this is so much more substantial than even you and I can try to put onto video for a newscast.
The fact that she actually sat down for this interview, I'm still a bit shocked by, frankly, because sitting with her, you see she lives this every day. Like, it's not just like, I'm through this and we're done and that trial was great and I'm moving on with my life. Like, there's, what you learn about trauma, and what I've learned about trauma from people in this, having gone through similar things, is that it reverberates, it redirects the course of your life, it rewires your brain. She'll even say that. And so she has to rewire it, and it takes years. And so any question in this interview potentially could set her off. And it was, I said she was not enjoying this interview. She realized it's necessary to come forward, and chose to come forward, because it's so important for her to talk about this topic of consent. But you can tell that she's doing better, but the trauma is right there. It's right underneath the surface.
Before we go, and we again want to encourage you to watch us tonight, watch this story tonight. Have you heard from the Weinstein camp?
I have.
What was that answer? What was that question to you? What was that statement?
They reached out and asked that I include some words from Mr. Weinstein.
You're going to hear some of that tonight on News Nation, I believe, correct?
Yep.
All right. Rich McHugh, thank you so much. I know it's not an easy topic. It's not something that we enjoy doing, but we believe as journalists that it's something that's necessary to do, not only for the story at hand, but for anyone else who may be going through that. Rich, thank you.
Thanks, Aaron.
All right, so again, coming up tonight, 8:30, 7:30 Central on News Nation. Rich McHugh has this exclusive interview with Jessica Mann, one of the accusers of Harvey Weinstein. Weinstein convicted in February of 2020. We encourage you to join us. News Nation Early Edition starts at 6 o'clock, 5 o'clock Central with Nicole Burley. We go all the way to 10 o'clock tonight Central Time. But again, that very special edition, special story is at 7:30, 8:30 Eastern Time right here on News Nation. And very quickly, if you don't know about our station, you want to find out more, we're right down the middle lane. We're a newscast that's not going to tell you how to think left or to the right. Just watch us and you decide how you feel about the news. Follow us. It is at News Nation Now. I'm Aaron Nolan. Have a fantastic afternoon.